Just a short while ago, I made a little video on 2012 prophecies, and I mentioned two related Lakota stories. I mentioned them just briefly, and I wanted to tell some other ancient Lakota stories and add more detail. But I'm long-winded, and I usually talk kind of slow, and I ran out of time before I even was able to squeeze two stories on here, so I'm gonna try this again and give just enough information so that the stories make sense. This first story is a real old story. Both of these stories, when you hear them, you'll have a sense of how old these stories are. Our understandings and our science goes way far beyond modern science. They don't even have a complete understanding of what's going on today, and their understanding of ancient times is really pitiful. This is a story that has to do with the red race, the indigenous peoples from what they call the Americas or the Western Hemisphere. But this story, when you hear it, if you think about it, you'll see how you could use a lesson from this story in your own personal life, no matter where you come from. This is not a very well-known story anymore, but it's one of my favorite stories. So anyways, how this story goes, a long time ago, all of the Indian people, and I'm not talking about people from India, but the red race, the indigenous people from what whites call the Americas, from this hemisphere, all of the Indian people were related. There wasn't over 500 nations and languages and so on. It was just one language, one group of people who were all together. And there was an argument, I think, probably between two women, and this argument got out of hand. Everyone was taking sides, and pretty soon there wasn't just two sides. Everybody seemed like had their own perspective and was arguing, to get their voice heard, and they weren't listening to no one else. It got out of hand to the point that the decision makers, or the elders in our race, had to bring everyone together and say, because of all this strife, what needs to happen now is that we all need to separate. So you get together with everybody who thinks the way you think, and you all go off somewhere on your own, and you stay away for 4 full years, and you discuss this and try to figure out how to solve this problem. And in 4 years' time, then everyone come back to the same place and meet, and we'll discuss it, and we'll try to find a solution then. So everybody left in several different bands. 4 years later, everybody came back. As soon as people began arriving, right away, the spokesman from each group got up and started arguing. Nobody was listening, everybody was yelling. Everyone's pointing fingers and still trying to force their perspective or their opinion on everyone. And after some time went by, the people began to realize they couldn't understand what anybody else was saying. Somehow, when everyone had been off on their own, they had developed distinct languages, and they couldn't understand anyone but those in their own little group. And so the people all stood there kind of dumbfounded, and then the elders said everybody just kind of drifted apart on their own, not really understanding what had happened. They said, though, that at some time way far into the future, that all of our people would be able to understand each other and would respect one another enough to listen to each other's perspectives, and then we'd come back, and then we would be one people again. Hopefully that time will come before too much longer, but it hasn't happened yet, and it's been thousands and thousands of years. That same thing happens. I guess it's human nature, but it happens all over. This other story that I'll tell is not as old as that one, but it's still an old story, even goes back more time than what the whites want to believe that we've been here or had a brain to think about stuff. All over the world at this time that I'm talking about, there were floods because everybody, all the four races, had stopped listening to the Creator and what He wanted for us to do, the way He wanted us to live. And so the Creator caused these floods to come to cleanse the earth. And while this was happening, here in this hemisphere, all the people, the different indigenous nations, were running to the highest ground trying to escape the floods, but it was taking everybody, just like same thing was happening in other parts of the world. And up in the sky there was a spirit, or maybe you want to call him an angel, or whatever kind of terminology. It seems like they're the same thing with modern people. If you say angel, they believe it because this world has become so Christianized. If you say spirit, they scoff at it because modern people, even though they don't realize that they have lost their spirituality. But anyways, the spirit looked down and he saw this beautiful woman. Her name was Wokpe, that means the beauty. He saw this beautiful young woman praying on a hill and he felt sorry for her. So the spirit turned himself into a giant eagle and he came down and he picked this woman up, saved her from the flood, and he took her to a place in Kinisapa, the Black Hills, where I'm sitting right now. At that time, the Black Hills were young mountains, and they're really, really high, real huge. They're really ancient mountains now, so they're not very big. He took her to a place, a butte, the highest butte. In Lakota is called achaeological, but that's one of the names for this place. The whites call it Harney Peak. They name it after a terrorist named General Harney, which is a really evil, disrespectful thing to do to a sacred place in a holy land like this. But that's what they call it. Anyways, right now I'm sitting at another sacred spot. I'm Keshla, and I'm about maybe 45-minute drive north, Makachokata. Anyways, the spirit took Wokpe to a nest that he built in the tallest pine tree on top of Makachokata, that means the center of the world. And there she was safe. Then he turned himself into a man and he married her. They had twins, and it's from those twins that eventually the Indian people or the red race evolved to repopulate this land where the Creator placed us. We didn't migrate here like the white people tried to say. We've always been here. And after time went by, the rain stopped, the waters began to subside, and they went down into the deepest valleys, and they carried the broken bodies of the people, humans, animals, birds, whatever, with it, into the deepest canyon in this country at that time. And after the waters had all either soaked down into the earth or evaporated, then the blood being, heavier than water, it was still there. Some of it soaked down into the earth, some of it stayed on top. Over time it solidified and it became a stone that you can only find at one place. Today they call it Pipestone, Minnesota. No other place in the world can you find that rock. And many generations later, when people started to stray from the instructions of the Creator again, then the Creator took the spirit of Wokpe and then he made a pipe from that sacred red stone, and he sent that woman, and then she became known as Tesawi, the albino buffalo cow woman. He sent her with that pipe and with his instructions back to this earth and to the people. And then when she came here, Tesawi, a lot of people, even fluent speakers, they call her Tatankaskawi or Tatankaskawia. That means white buffalo bull woman. But that's the extent that we've been Christianized and colonized by these white invaders today that we're even losing, our own perspective, our God-given perspective of things, even our own past. But anyways, Tesawe brought that pipe to us, and she told us about that stone, and she reminded the people of that story. And she said, because a stone is made from the past, from your ancestors, and because you use it in your lifetime, that's a present, and when you pray with it, you always pray for the future, for your coming generations. That links all time. There's no separation of time like you have with modern people. Everything is connected, and we're all drawn together there. And as she told us, you always have to have peace in your heart and in your mind when you look at that pipe or when you pray with it. And people who don't believe or people who have a bad mindset, they are not even allowed to see these pipes made from this sacred stone. And because that stone is made from the blood and the bodies of our ancestors, it's not right for non-Indian people to have that. That's like slavery, for them to own something like that. So there's a lot of rules or teachings that she laid down at that time, mostly to respect all life, not to differentiate between humans and non-humans, or between Indians and non-Indians or whatever, but to respect all life and to recognize everything of this universe as being of the same grandmother, the earth, and the same grandfather, the creator, and to respect each other as relatives and to live in that way. That's the teachings of that sacred pipe. Those are the two stories that I'll put on here anyways. And our prayers are always ended with the phrase Mitakwe Oyase, meaning that we're all related, to remind ourselves and each other of these things. If people paid less attention to what modern people are trying to say, mislead us, and pay more attention to these ancient stories and the teachings that the Creator sent to us directly, the world wouldn't be in the state that it is today, and the native people wouldn't be in the condition that we're in today. We need to show respect for the things that the Creator taught us and not listen to Iktomi, to these tricksters anymore. Amataka's.